One of the biggest hurdles a show like Curon has lies with its marketing. Dubbed as the Italian version of Dark, Netflix's latest mystery drama is unfortunately the next in a long line of casualties that will almost certainly disappoint after getting audience expectations up to an all-time high and failing to deliver. We've seen it with many successful shows over the years, including all those mystery box shows at the end of the 2000s, dubbed as the next Lost, and never really taking off. More recently, a whole slew of fantasy shows have tried, and largely failed, to grasp what Game of Thrones had in its heyday. While Curon itself isn't necessarily a bad show, it's not a particularly outstanding one either, and unfortunately this will almost certainly lead to large portion of viewers left disappointment when the final credits roll. The story itself gets off to a pretty good start, with a brief glimpse of the past, as a violent incident involving Anna's mother sees her killed by a figure that looks strangely like Anna herself. This image haunts her for years, and now, 17 years later, Anna returns to the town of Curon with her two children, Daria and Moro, after breaking up with partner Pietro and looking for greener pastures. Unfortunately, things are not as simple as they first appear, and as they stay in that very same hotel Anna's childhood nightmares emanate from, thumping in the locked door upstairs, coupled with Anna's disappearance, prove to be the catalysts for what follows. With half the town submerged in water, lots of shadowy figures and hints that something afoul is going on involving entities moving in the shadows, Curon combines elements of The Shining and mystery dramas like Dark, with a distinct teen drama vibe that just keeps bringing more questions into the fold. That final point is probably the most important to bear in mind before you jump into this, as Curon does such a good job raising questions that it forgets to answer any. By the time the finale fades to black, you ironically end up with more questions than you did once you started, and the show ends on a cliffhanger for good measure too. The characters themselves are good enough watch through though, but the second half starts to unravel and become more of a familial drama than an outright horror or mystery ensemble as it presented early on. Siblings Daria and Moro do well to keep you invested in what's happening, while exasperated Anna puts on a pretty convincing performance as this mother, struggling to make sense of her life. Props to Curon though, because when it comes to set design, production and general cinematography, the show does an excellent job utilizing many tricks of the trade. There's lots of interesting imagery involving wolves, which ties in both thematically and narratively with what happens, while the dark scenes are lit beautifully. They conjure up just enough of a spark to light a character face or two, while blanketing the rest of the scene in darkness to keep the uneasiness high. One scene involving a wolf inside a cave is arguably the highlight of the entire series, and this ties in with the excellent sound design too. Of course, if you go into this blindly, you're likely to have more joy than those who have followed the marketing over the weeks. Dubbing this show as the next Dark is a massive misstep, and to be honest, Curon is likely to be a casualty of its own pre-hype. Despite that though, the show does have an enjoyable enough mystery at the heart of this one, but the lack of resolution at the end, and the disappointing climax complete with a big cliffhanger, may be enough to turn people away. It's not perfect, it does have a few misfires along the way, but if you're in the mood for something a little bit thrilling, and a whole lot weird, Curon is worth giving a Netflix could be onto something special here. From the first episode alone, this Italian Netflix series manages to combine teen drama with supernatural and mystery elements beautifully, feeling like a medley of influences drawn from other sources, but combined into something that feels wholly fresh and exciting. There's elements of The Shining, Dark, and a plethora of horror films that make for a really fascinating and utterly engrossing watching. It will happen to you too, Lily tells her daughter Anna as episode 1 of Curon begins with her father clutching a gun tightly and taking her daughter upstairs. As muffled talk downstairs ensues, Anna heads down to investigate and sees her mother shot in the stomach by herself. As Anna passes out, we cut forward in time. Anna is now a lot older and drives her two kids Daria and Moro back to Curon, where she hasn't been for 17 years. As she makes it into the hallway of the ominous hotel she grew up in, fragments of the past come back as she remembers her father scrambling to take her out the house. As the kids heads upstairs to explore, Anna's father Thomas happens to be there to greet them. His greeting is frosty to say the least, telling Anna in confidence that the only reason she's there is to get away from her partner Pietro. He tells her to leave, prompting the kids to try and find a hotel to stay in. Only, when a blackout ensues in the local bar, Thomas arrives and allows them to stay in the hotel, just as the lights then come back on. As they walk, he tells the kids that the candles outside houses are there to ward off the shadows. It's a small note, but something that's definitely worth remembering going forward. Back at the hotel, Thomas tells the kids not to go near the bell tower under any circumstances. As the night draws in, Morrow hears something upstairs and awakens Daria. As she puffs on a cigarette, disinterested by his claims, Morrow decides to go and investigate as he follows the ominous thumping to a locked door. Despite trying to pick the lock, Thomas arrives and stops him, writing off the leaking water and thumping as the old hotel falling apart. Anna speaks to Daria about a recurring nightmare, talking about how it always ends at the same time. Unable to sleep, Anna decides to share the room with the kids, but ends up sleeping in Morrow's bed instead of Daria's, which doesn't sit well with her. In the morning, Anna drops the kids off at school after bumping into an old friend, Albert. Daria makes her feelings felt straight away in class. She establishes herself as someone you really don't want to mess with. Afterward, she heads out with Morrow to rent a boat. Unfortunately, the boat owner won't rent to their family, and they're forced to head home. On the road, they're approached by the boys from school who invite the twins along to the party, being held later that night. Morrow and Daria fall out, though when he wants to leave early, and as she starts drinking, he walks away into the woods and sneaks onto a boat with the intent of finding his drone. Daria meanwhile gets involved in a drinking competition with the boys, featuring bragging rights as the last one standing. Giulio and Avi discuss an old folk legend in Curon which reads that, when you hear bells coming from the tower you die. Writing it off as superstition, another blackout ensues shortly after, just as Morrow manages to recover his drone. He slips, plunging into the icy cold water as Daria does the same, and has vivid nightmares of a wolf hunting her in the woods. Back at the hotel, Morrow returns with his drone, but hears the familiar thumping again. This time, he picks the lock and makes it inside the room, where he sees his mother sitting in the corner chained up. Unlocking the chains, Anna knocks him down to the ground just as Thomas arrives and puts Morrow to bed. Thomas heads back into the locked-up room and grabs his gun, determined to track down exactly who or what happened to be inside the room, which is where the episode ends. With some nice rotating cameras and a seriously creepy and eerie atmosphere hanging over large swathes of this episode, Curon gets off to a really good start. The leaking room and what lies within is certainly an intriguing mystery, and it seems to be hinting that Anna may even have a sister. Daria and Morrow are decent protagonists to root for too, and as they slip further into this mystery, it seems Anna is hiding a lot of secrets from the past. So far so good, though, and Curon is certainly gearing up to become a must-watch mystery. Episode 2 of Curon begins in the past as the bell from the clock tower rings, causing Anna to clutch her head in pain. As Thomas drives her away, a strange figure emerges from the water and stalks them. Back in the present, Morrow and Daria discuss what happened the previous night. Thomas greets them, and Morrow immediately questions what he saw in the room. When Morrow heads inside the room, though, he finds the place completely empty. Strangely, Anna's nowhere to be seen, and Thomas matter-of-factly tells them that she went away to get some peace up in the mountains alone. Meanwhile, Thomas gets help from his friend who cryptically asks what's happening. Thomas tells him that Anna is different, and as they drive up the mountain, Albert watches Thomas's car from afar after noticing dead animals lying on the ground. As Thomas and his friend keep searching, they stumble upon a cave that may hold some clues. Thomas grabs his gun and torch and heads inside. In the darkness, two glowing yellow eyes stare back as a wolf steps out the shadows and stares him down. Backing up, Thomas flees whence he came, leaving the wolf to stare menacingly back. While Daria believes the story about their mother, Morrow is not so sure. At school, the teen drama continues as Mickey's kiss with Daria gets out after Lucas becomes jealous. As it turns out, Albert is actually Mickey's father, and their family are seemingly incredibly religious. While Daria gets cozy after being invited for lunch there, Lucas greets Morrow and discusses the town's secrets. He divulges details about legends involving murders and disappearances. As it turns out, Moro's family are actually the ones responsible for flooding the town all those years ago. Despite the warnings, Moro heads down to the docks and mulls over what he's learned before racing back to school and seeing graffiti on the walls regarding Mickey and Aria's kiss. News of Lucas's betrayal is too much for Mickey to deal with, and she rejects him. Back home, Lucas begins to feel ill and his pet cat Figaro acts strangely, hiding under the counter. As Lucas looks in the mirror, he sees himself staring back menacingly. Meanwhile, Thomas finds wreckage and tire tracks leading off the road, but he's encouraged by his friend not to go down and check, especially given it's getting dark. At home, Moro decides to use the drone and winds up seeing a figure walking in the locked room upstairs. He rushes up and sees Albert there, asking questions about Anna. He tells Moro to trust him and goes on to reassure the boy, telling him Anna is okay, but to keep him posted. As he leaves, Moro finds strange images etched on the wall in crayon. That evening, the trio return home after their own adventures for the day. Daria phones Anna's mobile and as they follow the vibrating, find the cracked screen stuffed in Thomas's jacket. Given he found this out in the woods, it's certainly an ominous sign, and one that sees the kids scramble inside the truck and head up to the mountains to go and investigate. Lucas's condition continues to worsen too, as he hears the bells ringing from the tower. Clutching his head, Lucas rises from the water and begins ominously walking to shore. With some great sound design inside the cave and an incredibly creepy scene involving the wolf, Curon balances out its supernatural elements nicely with the ongoing teen melodrama. It is a bit formulaic in truth, but it helps to strengthen the characters, and the background to the town of Curon is fascinating to discover. There's a lot of intricate details here, and seeing Albert suddenly appear inside that strange room upstairs is certainly an ominous sign. Even more disturbing though comes from what happened to Lucas involving the strange figure rising from the lake. Is this a doppelganger? When you hear the bells, does it mean you're going to die or is it a metaphor for being reborn as these strange lookalikes? There's lots of questions hanging over this one, and so far, Curon has done a wonderful job creating an air of mystery clinging to this series. Quite what will happen next remains to be seen, but this is one mystery you'll likely see through to. Episode 3 of Curon begins in the past as Anna and Albert spend time together while lying in bed. They snap photos and as he admits to loving her, she rejects his advances and gets dressed, telling him she's met someone else. As Albert storms off, this cuts us back to the present as he investigates their cabin, blood staining his fingers. News of Mickey's kiss gets back to her family, but Albert is supportive, telling her never to hide from who she is. Upstairs though, Anna's return to Curon causes issues between him and Clara, who wind up fighting. Daria and Moro attempt to find their mother up in the mountains, but Daria's driving, coupled with the steep roads, causes the truck to get stuck. Instead, they head up to a nearby house alone. Inside, they find luminous light and marijuana plants being grown. As we soon find out, these belong to Giulio. Meanwhile, Lucas returns to school but sees himself across the hallway. When he looks again though, this ominous figure is gone. They always say animals can sense something before us, and as Lucas heads home, his father berates him for scaring the cat and being in his garage fixing his bike. Only this obviously isn't the same Lucas we know given he's been at school. When Lucas heads out to investigate, the wheel of the bike spins ominously, and as he turns around, Lucas stares back at him. The doppelganger stalks the frightened boy, trying to kill his alter self, which prompts Lucas to scramble in his room and lock the door. Thomas turns to Albert for help and mentions how Anna has gone missing, and that she spoke of the valley to the kids. With both Moro and Aria wandering the forest and the threat of wildlife attacking or worse, the two siblings wind up fighting over the best way to proceed forward. As night blankets the world in a thick veil of darkness, the two siblings find the cabin in the woods. Only, they're distracted by Thomas arriving with Albert. Daria immediately confronts Thomas over why he had Anna's phone, but he remains tight-lipped for now. Before they grab the kids and take them home, Thomas notices an earring on the floor and immediately grabs it, believing it may belong to their mother. At home though, the twins sit down with Thomas and learn more about their past. Anna has disappeared and they don't know where she is. Morrow mentions the carvings on the wall and admits that strange things, particularly in that room, occur inside the town. Thomas tells them grimly that the woman he saw was not Anna, but shadows that have been haunting their family for years. In the morning, Thomas heads back to the woods in order to check the car wreckage for clues. However, he finds no blood and immediately suspects that this may be Albert's handiwork. Back at school, Lucas approaches Mickey and tells her about the look-alike following him around. She doesn't believe him, of course, and walks away. Daria meanwhile blackmails Giulio about his greenhouse and drug operation. That evening, after showing Daria the earring he found, the two siblings sneak back up to the cabin and decide to look around for clues. Inside, Morrow finds spatters of blood on the floor, some of which still fresh as it drips to the floor. The other earring is inside the house. When Albert returns, the two kids quickly scramble to hide as creaking prompts Albert to quietly call Anna's name. "Who's here?" Cocking his rifle, Albert begins counting as the siblings try to remain calm and quiet. When Albert finds them, Thomas arrives and stops him, knocking the man down and questioning what he's done with Anna. While Mickey and the others prepare their dinner table, Albert is arrested up at the cabin and held in police custody for his part in all this. Is he guilty or innocent? Meanwhile, Lucas continues to struggle and heads into the garage again, where he finds himself staring back, eventually leading to a chase through the woods. Only, Lucas can't kill his own doppelganger, which gives it enough of a chance to rise up and kill Lucas. Back home he takes Lucas's spot and, presumably, his life. Is this what's happening around town? Are all the different townsfolk being switched for doppelgangers? What is the trigger for the bells ringing? What happened to Anna? And why is there such fear for the shadows? There's a lot of questions being raised in Curon now, and the show has done an excellent job raising the stakes every episode so far. As we reach the midway point of the show, Curon leaves the door wide open for where this one may go. Episode 4 of Curon begins with a flashback sequence as Pietro shouts at Anna from the kitchen, while a young Morrow listens at the doorway. In the present, Morrow senses that their mother is still alive. While the town gear up for a fire festival, a way of warding off the shadows, Pietro arrives in Curon asking for directions to the Rhina Hotel. While the kids contemplate what happened to Anna, Pietro enters the hotel. Thomas holds a gun up to him, though, and forces him to leave. Meanwhile, Lucas listens to classical music and starts crushing up pills, mixing them with cat food and milk to give to Figaro. As his father calls out for him, Lucas places the dish down and heads out to church, where he tells Mickey to meet him in the pub later that day. Once there, David scoffs at Lucas's suggestion of going to the liquor store, but as he leaves, Lucas happens to waiting and watching in the shadows. As the lights go out, Lucas sneaks up behind the boy and chokes him out, demanding he join them. After this menacing encounter, Lucas heads home and nonchalantly admits that Figaro was pissing him off, which is why he killed him. As he walks away, snatching up the car keys, his father is left dumbfounded at this revelation. Meanwhile, the priest approaches Thomas at his hotel and tells him he won't rest until all the Rhinas are placated, going on to cryptically reveal the balance has been upset now that the twins have returned. Giulio shows Mickey his wheat operation and admits that the reason he's doing this is to save up enough money to leave town, and he wants her to join him. Before that, though, they head up to the cabin Albert frequented and find the bloodstains and pictures of Anna. When they feed this back to their mother, however, she defiantly tells them Albert is innocent. That evening, the townsfolk walk in silence through the streets while Lucas meets Mickey and convinces her to walk with him. While they do, Pietro runs into Daria and Morrow in the pub and help them get served. As they sit with him, Pietro finally admits why Anna kicked him out. It turns out they had an argument, but this time was different. He pushed Morrow into a table and he hit his head, which is actually how he lost his hearing. Shocked, Morrow walks away, but as Daria chases after him, she loses her brother in the crowd. Giulio shows up, though, and agrees to help her look for him, but not before they sit together smoking. Lucas and Mickey wind up fighting down by the docks after he declares his love for her, which leads him to hold her down while the pyre in town ignites. Thankfully, Mickey is saved by Morrow before anything bad happens. That evening, Morrow and Daria wake up to find someone has set their hotel on fire. As flames lick up the side of the building, Anna stands watching the flames. With Anna now back and Lucas's rampage starting to unsettle a lot of the different residents in town, it looks like all of this links back to the church in the middle of the lake. There's a lot of mystery still to be unraveled, though in this episode certainly leans in a lot heavier on the character drama as Pietro returns to the fold. Compared to what we've seen from previous episodes, this is arguably the weakest so far, but there's still enough here to whet the appetite and keep you watching. Quite what will happen next, however, remains to be seen. Episode 5 of Curon begins in the past with Anna deciding to leave Albert for good, admitting she's pregnant, and he's not the father. As he starts to get involved with Clara instead, Albert hears the bells ringing out on the water, and he ends up being pulled under by someone or something. Only, this is actually the doppelganger version as the real Albert floats to the surface, dead. Back in the present, Daria and Mauro greet their mother, but following the fire, Mauro is distant with her, and even more so given Thomas is currently in hospital. Anna claims to have gotten herself lost, but he's not so sure, questioning why her phone was missing and her earrings gone. While Daria brushes this off as coincidence and needless questioning, Mauro remains suspicious that she may not really be their mother. Albert returns home after his stint in prison, but his kids are frosty, to say the least. Especially after seeing the cabin for themselves, they don't trust him. Eventually Mickey confronts him about it, but he simply brushes it off by claiming to kill and skin animals there and nothing more. They don't buy it, though, and as they head outside together, they run into Daria and Mauro. Together, the four kids head to school, where Lucas confronts Mickey in the bathroom and tells her he's always loved her. When she hurries away, he stares after her with an ominous evil grin. Clara watches in the wings as Anna approaches the wolf cage at the hotel and opens it up, trying to encourage the wolf to leave. Instead, it whimpers and stays inside. When Clara returns home and informs Albert what happened, he confronts her over the bad dream he had. Back home, Anna and Pietro fight over the kids, and as he shoves her into the fridge, a glass shatters on the ground just as the siblings return home. Anna squares up to him with a menacing look, though, and tells him to leave. In the wake of this, the trio sit and eat together as Mauro starts choking. To Daria's horror, it turns out Anna made him hazelnut cake which he's allergic to. In the aftermath of this, he and Daria sit together and discuss the possibility that this could be the other Anna trying to kill him. Anna meanwhile takes Thomas's truck and heads up the mountains, cursing her luck. When she arrives at her destination, the other Anna happens to be there, and she admits to killing her mother. It turns out Thomas kept her in the loft and lied about the suicide story all this time. For now, the other Anna remains stuck in the abandoned cabin, while Anna drives down to pick up Pietro, where they drive together down to the river, and she callously shoots him in cold blood. Meanwhile, Daria and Mauro visit Thomas in hospital, and he reveals what's really going on. There are two sides to everyone, and it starts with a headache, then the bells ring, which leads to the side you wanted to eliminate arriving from the lake looking to kill you, taking over your life. Interestingly, this also links back to that early school lesson about the two wolves and feeding the right one. Thomas tells them to head home, but on the way, Mauro realizes that Lucas is also a doppelganger and sets to work trying to work out what to do next. Clara spots Albert and Anna kissing and contemplates shooting them both. When she can't pull the trigger, she slumps against her Jeep and weeps. The four kids meanwhile decide to team up and investigate further into these doppelganger versions. With more answers now regarding the doppelgangers and the truth of what happened in the past, Curon does well to balance this up with the mystery elements. Given there's now two Annas running around, and Thomas's earlier mention to the priest surrounding how she's different, it appears as though this may directly link to the fact there's two of them, rather than one being killed off as seems to be the case with everyone else. How far does this mystery go? Has everyone in town been changed and transformed? It's certainly an interesting question, and one I'm sure we'll find out over the final 2 episodes. Curon may not be the strongest mystery of the year, and its later episodes have paled compared to some of the early season drama, but there's enough here to enjoy none. Episode 6 of Curon begins with Anna's doppelganger forcing the real Anna to pack her things up and move. As they drive, Anna too realizes that she's trying to use her phone and subsequently crashes the car, throwing the phone away and taking her to the cabin. There, she begins cutting her hair to look exactly like Anna. As Anna too threatens her counterpart, Anna demands she reveal everything she knows about the kids. Back in the present, Daria and Morrow look to leave in the morning, but Anna too immediately suspects something up. Morrow instead calls her bluff and takes her upstairs, encouraging the impostor to look out the window. Only, in doing so he locks her in the room and demands to know where his Ray mother is. Getting nowhere, the siblings decide to leave. At the same time, Mickey and Gilio also leave after a strange encounter with their mother. Snatching up the gun for themselves, they leave while Carla admits that she's coming soon and she can feel it's going to change. Albert embraces her and promises things will be okay, desperate to get his rifle to keep her safe. Meanwhile, Mateo calls the priest after what happened with the cat. He sits with Lucas and tries to reason with him, but the madness in Lucas's eyes when he mentions fires rising certainly causes him to feel uneasy. Thomas returns home and hears Anna banging on the door. He eventually heads in and speaks to this doppelganger, asking where Anna is. Thomas admits to loving her and looking after her all these years, but refuses to cave. Heading downstairs, he phones his friend who gives him some encouraging words agreeing to go searching for the twins while he deals with Anna too and tries to get her to reveal the truth. The four kids walk through the woods, but when Mickey winds up missing, a call for help pierces the air and sends them running after her. At the same time, Clara's doppelganger arrives at the house, but Albert traps her, grabbing the girl by the throat and killing her. In the aftermath of this, Albert admits that he doesn't love her, and now Anna has returned, he has to go to her. Meanwhile, the assailant in the woods happens to be Lucas, who waits for the kids to arrive and holds them all up at gunpoint. Lighting a fire, he douses the ground with petrol but becomes distracted when something stirs in the shadows. It's Berger, and despite saving the kids from their fate, receives a gunshot to the stomach for his troubles. Thankfully, Lucas's shadow also dies in the ensuing skirmish. Back at the hotel, Albert returns and saves Anna too from being tortured by Thomas and agrees to stand by her side. At the same time, Clara too awakens from her ordeal and promises Clara that her suffering is over. While Gilio and Aria hook up in the cabin, Anna too leads a wolf into the locked room where they're keeping Thomas. At the same time, a pack outside gathers around Berger and Lucas's bodies. As the episode closes out, we are no closer to finding out exactly what's happening in regards to the bells ringing and why some people have heard it and others haven't. The mystery is interesting enough to keep watching, and there's certainly some intriguing recurring imagery regarding the wolves too. Complicating matters is the subject of death with these shadows, and it seems that the shadows are invincible. If the original host is still alive, at least that's my interpretation. This hasn't been fully explained though, so hopefully the finale sheds some light on this. It's always difficult to maintain intrigue with a series like this, and Curon has certainly been far from perfect, especially with its numerous questions still to be answered. It's been an enjoyable ride though, so let's hope the finale ends things with a. The sound of rattling chains begins the season 1 finale of Curon as the real Anna tries in vain to escape her prison. Morrow and Daria's echoing voices are enough to encourage her to reach out, finding something she can use as a lockpick and starting to break free of her chains. Meanwhile, the wolf inside the bathroom stirs and begins barking at Thomas. They wrestle, with Thomas gaining the upper hand and telling the creature to go back to the woods again. Breathing heavily, he whispers, "You're free." As it slips away, Carla too drags the real Carla out to the woods and buries her, unaware that Albert and Anna happen to be hooking up in his Jeep parked nearby. After their sordid ordeal, they head up to a cave where Albert proclaims they're going to get the life they deserve. Inside, the duo creep through the eerily quiet and dark passageways together. Meanwhile in the cabin, the four kids leave and begin trudging through the snow, but when they lose sight of which way to go, they begin to argue amongst themselves until Mickey helps guide them out. As they find Albert's truck, it's here they realize they're heading to the plane of the dead to kill the real Anna, which links to those early episode scenes of her chained up. Inside the labyrinth, however, Anna too and Albert arrive and realize Anna has escaped. As they frantically look around to find where she's gone, the four kids head in and start searching around, stumbling upon a whole stack of bones on the floor. At the same time, Carla too and Thomas stop while heading through the woods and finding Berger and Lucas too. Realizing they're up at the plane of the dead, Thomas blames himself for what's happened, and the duo begin to drive up there together. In the tunnels, the kids wind up separated as the labyrinth stretches on. Daria and Morrow both find the different versions of her mother down separate passageways, but the real questions is just who the real one is. They don't have long to wait though, as the two versions of Anna stand side by side in a large open area. Albert realizes he's lost Anna, but does run into his kids as Mickey and Gilio force him to drop his weapon after suspecting he's a doppelganger. A shout from behind is enough of a distraction for them to let their guard down and lose their upper hand as Albert marches them in the direction of the cries. Albert arrives with the gun and turns his attention on both versions of Anna. Eventually he makes his choice and kills the real Anna before turning the gun on himself and firing. Morrow sees this take place and rushes out, desperate to find Anna too, while Daria tries in vain to follow after. At the same time, Thomas starts to climb up the mountainside. Morrow senses what's up and tells Daria to let the shadow go. Eventually she does and watches as she falls to her doom. Inside the caves, Clara too embraces her children as they sit weeping over the death of her father. Clara exhibits a fair amount of disdain toward Anna's body as she passes though, and soon after, they all head down the mountain together, stopping momentarily on the road as a wolf crosses their path. In the aftermath of what's happened, Mickey and Gilio realize that they're children of the doppelganger Albert, and it's all too much for Mickey to handle as she doubles over and clutches her head. At the same time, Lucas's body is taken back to his father, courtesy of the priest, who informs the curse has been unleashed, and they need to prepare for what's coming. As the words echo across establishing shots of Curon, both Mickey and Daria find themselves suffering from extreme headaches. The bells toll and over the frozen lake, the two doppelgangers begin to stir, which is where the episode ends. Well, we've been given the trademark Netflix cliffhanger with this one and barely any answers in the process. The death and birth of doppelgangers is certainly confused by Clara coming back to life without a scratch, so is it safe to assume that doppelgangers can come back if their original host lives? If the theory does ring true and shadows are immortal unless the host is killed, wouldn't they just keep them locked up somewhere like Anna did, rather than killing them off? What is so special about Anna, like Thomas mentioned? And what happened in the past that rattled this town so much? Why was the town flooded? What significance do the candles have outside houses? Why all the religious symbology? And will we ever get any answers to these questions? There's a lot still to answer, and the biggest problem Curon has actually lies with its marketing. Why was this branded as the Italian version of Dark? With only a single episode down, the show certainly exhibits some similar traits, but the two shows branch out and have nothing really in common. No disrespect to Curon, of course, and the story itself is interesting enough that you want to find out answers to these questions, so you'll at least make it to the end of this first season. It's just frustrating that we haven't actually received any definitive answers at the end beyond a climactic showdown. Perhaps the biggest question of all then comes from whether Curon can conjure up enough interest from fans to get the green light for a renewal or not. Until then, Curon ends with a frustrating whimper rather than a triumphant roar.